Okay. Does it work? I'm going to show you two examples of people who've made changes in their teaching. The first one is not about course design per se, but it's really about the active learning, although they had to design the course differently just to get this active learning in. But this was a study that was done by a Nobel Prize winner, a person named Carl Wyman, who won the Nobel Prize in physics. But he decided to use all the fame and the money he got from the Nobel Prize not to do more physics work, but to work on science education. So he's been doing that for the last several years at the University of Colorado in the US and at British Columbia in Canada. And he published an article on this in Science Magazine, a very prestigious magazine, in 2011. Here's the experiment he did. He took a class that was not his own but somebody else's, because he wanted to be just somebody regular professor. But this was a professor at British Columbia who taught two sections, very large sections, of an introductory physics class. 250 students in each class. And they met for Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. He checked on the characteristics of the students in both sections, and they were almost identical, essentially identical. And then he said to the professor, "Can we have your permission to change what happens in class just for 1 week of the course? Not the whole year, the whole semester, just for 1 week, about week 12. Okay? And the professor said yes. So what he did was then he had some of his graduate students work with that professor. We're going to keep the learning goals the same. We're just going to change the learning activities. We're going to keep the assessment. We're going to do a test at the end of that week and do it in both sections, the regular section and the changed section. Okay? And the class met Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So they only had 3 class sessions to work on this. So here's what was happening before they made these changes. Only half of the students were even coming to class. The attendance was averaging about 57 out of 57%. They had students the graduate students sitting in class watching the students, and were they paying attention or doing something else? And again, only half of the ones who were there were paying attention. So what you have is only 25% were either coming and or paying attention. Not very good, okay? After they made these changes, well, let's see. Well, let me go back to what did they change? What was happening in the regular class was the teacher was lecturing, sort of like I'm doing now. But the students went in and said, we're not going to lecture. We're going to ask the students to read the book before class. And when you come to class, we're going to ask you to read or to work on problems in class in groups. Say, here's a problem, work it, show us your answers, dialogue with each other, and then we'll tell you whether you got the right answer or the wrong answer. So all the class time was not lecturing. The class time was working on problems in groups with immediate feedback. Not next week, but immediate, right on the spot. That was a change. What happened when they made those changes? The first thing that happened was the attendance in 3 days went from 57% to 75% in the experimental section. The other thing that happened was the percentage of time that the students were paying attention went from about 50% to 85%, almost doubled. They were paying attention to what was going on in class. But the big question is, yeah, that's nice. They came to class, they were more engaged. Did they learn better? Well, they gave both sections the same test, the test that the professor wanted to give in the regular section. They gave that test to both sections. What happened? The experimental section almost doubled in their performance. Okay? Let me show you the chart that they put in the Science magazine. Here it is right here. Okay? There's a possibility of 12 questions on it. Okay? And the number of students who answered that number of questions correct in each of the 2 sections. The light gray, so I apologize for the quality of this because I had to scan it into there. But this light gray part was in the regular section. Okay, right here. And you can see that most of the students in that section only got 4 or 5 questions correct out of 12. There was a spread, but the majority of them were down in 4 or 5 questions. Less than half of the questions that they got correct. But in the experimental section, the one where they worked problems in class, that's the dark line, and most of the students got 10, 11, or 12 questions correct. They basically more than doubled the amount of correct answers. What was also interesting about that was question number 12. If you read the article very carefully, question number 12, the students in the experimental section did not even study that. They didn't get to it. But because they had studied the other material so well, they could figure out on their own during the test how to solve that question. And you can see most of them got it, 20% of them got it right, where almost nobody in the other section got it right. So the learning was much, much better when they introduced active learning. That was just a limited part of course design. I thought that was a powerful study. Let me show you another one where a person did do the whole course design differently. This was a person who attended a 2-day workshop on course design, like what I did here, only spread out over 2 days instead of 1 hour here. Professor in computer science at one of the schools in the United States. He had a Monday, Wednesday class, a fairly small class, and he was doing what everybody in computer science did. Lecture, homework, lecture, homework. But it was really working badly. He'd been teaching for about 3 years. He was a junior professor. The students would work for a few weeks, and then they just got overwhelmed by the math. They gave up, refused to work. They hated him, hated the class, couldn't perform on the test. It was awful. It was really bad. He came to a workshop on this. He went home, and he totally redesigned the class. Here's what he did. He completely rewrote his learning goals. He used that taxonomy and wrote learning goals for all 6 categories. I just showed you 3 of them here, just so I can get on the slide. First one is application. He wanted students to compute the rate of reliable transmission. Next one was human dimension, working with others in a group. The last was learning how to learn about new codes that come out, what they are, how to assess them, and how to use them, and so forth. Okay. Next thing he did was he used a new teaching strategy. That was the part I flipped through. I used a thing called team-based learning, where you use small groups in a powerful way. He used reflective writing, where students reflect on how they're learning, not just what they're learning, but how they're learning, and put it in a thing called a learning portfolio. Made oral presentations, and finally, a little bit of a twist on the assessment. He had them turn in their homework, and if they didn't get it all right, they could redo it for a better grade. Okay? He made those changes, and what happened? First of all, even though he was lecturing very little after he changed the course, on the exams, just the foundational knowledge, the students did just as good after with no lecturing, little or no lecturing, as they did before. But the big change was, the professor reported, he made a paper a couple of years later about what happened. He said there was a drastic improvement in student morale. Whereas before they got discouraged and gave up and started trying, now they worked harder and reported enjoying it more. Okay? Just the opposite of what we think will happen. Here's what a couple of students said. Interesting experience. Another student said, I enjoyed it in the fullest. It was entertaining, meaning enjoyable, and enlightening, meaning I learned a lot. Okay? Now, if you can teach a course where the students are working harder, enjoying it more, and learning better, what does that do for you as a teacher? You start enjoying teaching again. He had lost the joy of teaching. It's not fun to see students angry and upset at you in the course and not learning. He didn't like that any more than you would. But he changed the course, and it totally changed the way the results were. Now, what's interesting about this, notice what he changed and what he did not change. He didn't change the students. Whatever students they had at his university before, they had the same students. He didn't change the content. He didn't water it down. He didn't change his own personality. Whatever sense of humor or human skills he had before, he had afterwards. The only thing he changed in that course was the way he designed the course. New learning goals, new learning activities, new assessment activities, new integration and teaching strategies. He changed those 4 things, and his course went from awful to fantastic. And my belief is other people, well, I know other people have done the same thing because they told me about it, but it really makes a big difference. Okay, so that's my answer to the question, does it work? Lots and lots of evidence that it does. Now, my final comment here, you still have to teach the course right. This is just the design part that I've been talking about. But my belief is, if you design it right and teach it right, it will happen right. Meaning the students get excited, they learn a lot, and everything's going good. Final, help you learn more. There are some additional resources. There's a website out there you can go. We're putting all the things, archives and handouts and examples of good things in that website there. We have created an online short course that lasts about 8 weeks, where if people want to learn about it, they can take this online course about it and learn about it on that website. People, you can be a help for each other. If there are people from the same university here, you can go back and read that book that Gary and his friends translated and help learn about it and how to put it into practice. But also remember your dreams for student learning. If you would like to see your students get engaged and learning some exciting things, you can make that dream happen. And I think it's worth happening because you can change your students' lives if you can give them a more powerful experience. And you can change what happens to them after they leave college, your course, and after they leave college. We can change Japan. Even all of us work, all the people in this audience here working together and helping with other teachers. You could make a difference in Japan, and that would be an exciting thing. So I'll finish up with that. Thank you very much, and I wish you good luck in all you're trying to do here in Japan. Thank you very much.